Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Straight Talk, sponsored by Inglis and Darley. My name's Brent O'Brien, and joining me, as per usual, is Tim Rowe. This week, Racing New South Wales tightens its grip on the racing landscape through a landmark national tote agreement with Tabcorp. Questions linger over the long-term implications of the deal as the national tote moves closer to launch. Inbreeding and bloodstock. Hong Kong investors reaffirm their commitment to New Zealand and Australia despite missing out on the Oak Stud. Australian bloodlines dominating again in Japan. And our latest run the numbers examines trainers, owners and stallions shaping the future through juvenile ranks. While in wagering, Tabcorp again strengthening their retail footprint through a major new venue agreement, while bookmakers continue to carve out increasingly distinct digital strategies in the battle for customers. Tim, let's kick off with, I guess the topic we'll talk about most here and probably the longest will be the national tote. Now, we've got sign-off, I guess officially, just in terms of where the process sits at the moment. All the states and their codes have agreed. The only thing that Tabcorp needs now before this kicks off is agreement from the regulators in each of those states. That could take 3 days. It could take 3 months. We don't know. Anticipating they'll roll it out probably in the next month or so, assuming they get that. There had been an August 22 touted as a date, but Tab have sort of denied that they would do that. And, I guess they're probably keen to go slowly. But it'll be interesting to see what this impact this makes. I guess from your perspective, Tim, how significant was the deal between Tabcorp and Racing New South Wales, which came about yesterday, sort of, as Peter V'landys heads off on his much vaunted long service leave and going to be executive chairman of the Australian Rugby League Commission. How significant was this deal, do you think, that they got over the line with Racing New South Wales and that, effectively brought the national tote to life after 25 years of waiting for it?
Well, it's significant for Tabcorp, Gillon McLaughlin, Michael Fitzsimmons as well, the chief wagering officer. I think that's made it a mandate, that's something they really wanted to achieve. And I know the share price has gone up this week, sort of nearly 10%, sort of sitting about 90 cents as we speak. So obviously the market's reacted to it. There's still a lot of unanswered questions. I think Michael Fitzsimmons was on the radio this morning, SEN, sort of speaking, probably the most information we've had so far about takeout rates and some of their plans and wholesale models. I think for it to work, really make a significance, they need the corporates to get behind it and put their tote derivative bets back into the pools. And how they incentivize them to do that, I'm not sure, because at the moment they're making a hell of a lot more by just holding those bets rather than putting them into a pool. Even with a commission or a rebate, I'm not sure. Clearly Michael sort of suggested they're working with the WSPs to get that over the line, but again, it's just going to be very interesting whether they get the sports bets and the entains and that over the line to back it.
Yeah, it is a fascinating one. I think, anecdotal sort of stuff that I've heard sort of background was that Gil McLaughlin presented the opportunity as a de-risking strategy to the corporate bookmakers about 4 or 5 months ago and was pretty much told, buddy, we do risk management for, that's what bookmakers do. So don't, we're not concerned about that. The tote, best tote bets aren't a risk necessarily profile. Was interesting to listen to Michael Fitzsimmons talk about the fact that they may look to add other sweeteners and other opportunities in there in order to get them over the line. There's a bit of willing and dealing to be done. They may have learned a bit from dealing with Peter V'landys, who's very good at making a deal and getting it done. As I mentioned, it's the last thing he probably will do, or he probably did before he headed off to his temporary reassignment. We think that may end up becoming a permanent reassignment. It might be the most significant, one of the more significant things he's done in terms of the future of New South Wales racing. We don't yet know exactly how this one's going to play out. So obviously the concept is there's more money flowing back into all the racing jurisdictions because there'll be more money flowing through the tote. That's the plan, right? And how it works. Now, the money that flows back into New South Wales, of course, should technically go back through the clubs as part of the TAB distribution agreement. We don't know how that may look in New South Wales. We haven't seen how this looks. There's also another little thing at play here, Tim, that in New South Wales there's a piece of legislation which basically means that Tabcorp can't sell more than 10% of its shares to an individual person or individual party without the consent of, I think it's the racing minister or whatever else it is, how it works. Is there a chance that may get loosened in time, which obviously would be a corporate, shackle off Tabcorp as well. So there's a lot of play in this stuff. But what I want to talk to you quickly about, Tim, is every punter you talk to is like, well, how does this affect me? Will they change takeout rates? Because every punter has noticed that margins with taxation and profitability, et cetera, got higher and higher and higher. It's harder to get your money back every time. the tote was seen, or the national tote was seen as an opportunity for yeah, a bit of price liquidity, I suppose, or movement around, reduce the takeout. The first three things that I heard Michael Fitzsimmons say this morning weren't exactly about taking margins down, Tim.
No, they've gone up, and it might seem minute in terms of, the quaddies, which are a very popular bet. A lot of people just love it, having a quaddie, going up sort of 0.5%, and it's basically New South Wales. Everything's merging into the New South Wales model, which I wasn't aware actually that the percentages were slightly different between Super Tab and New South Wales. So, Michael did say to his, to give him credit or without changing his words, that they will review these takeout rates once it's up operational. It's just for ease, I guess, of alignment. They've gone with New South Wales and, UTAB, some of those percentages have come down. I guess if you're watching Sky Channel and the fixed odds is consistently worse than the tote, maybe that'll switch behaviour. But at the moment, I can't. So that's a bit like probably like the World Pool. If you continually see the favourite winning and getting smashed, and it's a point less than what it was fixed odds, you're not going to go to the World Pool as a rule. But if you consistently see during the week or you're on a Saturday, geez, I cost myself there, you'll start. But I think that might lead to a change of behaviour. And to do that, you've got to reduce the takeout rates. I think more, they promise generosities as well, so whether they do that to help retail, you get, I don't know, better percentage in the pubs. I don't know how they do it, but they'll be obviously they've got some incentives to try and encourage punters to use the tote.
It'd be fascinating to see if we get some breakdowns for the PRAs in the next 12 months about what the actual material revenue difference will be and what that looks like, and whether it's, because I think there's a sense here that it's important to do it, but the impacts of it won't yet be known. So I think like there's a few things to play out here. Obviously, getting to this point, like, I put in the newsletter today, kudos to Gillan McLaughlin and Mike Fitzsimons and the Tabcorp team for getting anything on a national basis in Australia. We know how difficult that is, Tim. We write about this dysfunction, national dysfunction every day. So to actually get that across the line will be interesting. The day-to-day effect on tote punters won't be significant. What was also interesting, for something that Mike Fitzsimons said this morning, Tim, was that he was talking about Whirlpool and that they'll have a chat with Whirlpool about the takeout rates. I don't know if they have that conversation or go, because I'm tipping the way that a Whirlpool and obviously driven from Hong Kong operates is, you want to be part of our gig, you pay our prices. And I think for Australian punters, it'll be an interesting one, because like, the key for the tote will be trying to get the mass punters back, won't it? It won't be trying to get, like, big punters will be important, that sort of stuff, but it would be trying to convert the masses back to it. Well, where do the masses bet on? They bet on big Group 1 races. And so if they kind of constantly see they're getting worse prices, and then the bookmakers can then target those to say, hey, here's a differentiation. It's a really tough sell. So it'll be interesting to see how that all pans out. Continue to watch that story. I think it'll evolve more. I think Tab are probably keen to roll it out relatively low key, because they don't want anything to go wrong. You imagine if anything went wrong with it. But I think the racing bodies, particularly Racing New South Wales, would love to see it sort of front and centre on Winx Stakes Day. I don't know if we'll get that date or not.
I think it's worth mentioning as part of that national tote deal, the Sky Racing, or sorry, Sky Thoroughbred Central, the third Sky 3, that covers New South Wales and Queensland racing principally. I think there's a little bit of Tassie on there occasionally. But look, that confirmation effectively, most people that have watched that channel for any length of time will go, geez, it's New South Wales centric, but sort of confirmation that basically Racing New South Wales will have control of that editorially for the New South Wales. Queensland, they say, Tabcorp is sort of adamant that nothing will change for Queensland broadcast or coverage, but for New South Wales, basically editorial content controls will be made by Racing New South Wales rather than Tabcorp, which is sort of how it's worked in the past. But what I got told, an example is Tabcorp, they wanted to use a Sky One host. I don't know. I just don't want to be unfair to Brad Davison, but someone like that. Okay, you need to be roped into STC today for whatever reason. Or next week on the rostering, they would have to get written approval from Racing New South Wales. Seems it's quite an oddity, I would suggest, but that's where it's at. And basically, Peter V'landys said in the release that they're promising big changes to sort of embrace modern consumer habits, I guess, to try and make racing appealing. So it'd be interesting to see what happens there going forward for viewers, the staff, or on-air talent, and things like that. It's a bit unclear at the moment.
Yeah, there's a few other questions around that. I mean, does Sky Thoroughbred Central look to make a free-to-air play at some point, Tim? What does that look like? How do you make that work? That's just coming from the fact that that has been mooted before. In a world where wagering advertising will be highly restricted on free-to-air TV, outside of a racing context, does that have more value? Who knows? You'd be foolish of the racing industry, and for Tabcorp might be looking at those opportunities. We'll see what happens. But of course, that sort of national approach stuff and what goes on is something we've spoken about a bit. And we'll switch on to another topic now, Tim, around about the patent stuff that was announced last Friday. So obviously we were sitting here last Friday and you and I got an email from the Asian Patent Committee to tell them that they've actually, upgraded a host of races and given new status to 19 of them, I think. We anticipated this might have been the case, didn't we, Tim? We thought that maybe there'd be a lot more upgrades before there were downgrades, and we'll see what happens from here, whether that happens going forward. I mean, was that your take out of it?
Listen, the Racing Australia chair told me in the straight that last December when Asian Racing Federation just took over the running of the Australian patent, I guess that was going to be the case. And a lot of those upgrades were races that Racing New South Wales had badged with black type that wasn't internationally recognised. So, and they were using sort of ratings to do that, official handicap ratings, and so most of them had met that. It's just they hadn't gone through the processes, and Australia hadn't had a working patent committee for pretty much almost 10 years. So it's the process more than what the outcome is. Interesting, the Golden Eagle must have rated up to expectations last year because pre that, as strong as the 2024 Golden Eagle was, I think was there 8 subsequent Group 1 winners come out of the race. It didn't actually meet the handicap, narrowly missed out. I think it rated 114 or something like that, and it needs to rate 115 for 3 years in succession, something like that. I'm sure the experts will correct me on that, but I don't think anyone can argue it is a very good race. Whether it should have been implemented or the prize money's obscene and far too much, that's another separate argument. But it is a very good race, and I think it does deserve Group 1. And, that Asian Patent Committee have sort of made their decisions up till end of December, and we'll find out sort of from their September meeting what they decide for the rest of the racing season from January to end of July next year.
Yeah, and you would think that probably the conversation around this, again, a bit like the national tote, will roll on for the next 18 to 24 months, I think, Tim. It'll be probably this time next year where we're going to start seeing possible Group 1 racing downgrades, and those races that have sort of been put on notice of having to sort of, either pivot or, risk their status. And we'll move to 77 Group 1s at this stage in the upcoming season. I don't think that'll change. The amount of stakes races has increased. The state by state, Victoria still has more stakes races. Victoria and New South Wales now have 31 Group 1s apiece. So it sort of gives a bit of parity to them, the Golden Eagle promotion. It is kind of interesting. The Golden Eagle is actually mentioned in the discussions around Racing New South Wales' deal with TAB, to saying that they will help fund the Golden Eagle moving forward, which, as you mentioned before, is a significant. It was supposed to be funded by odds and evens, as I recall back in the day, Tim. That I'm not too sure how that worked out, but no, it's interesting one to sort of work through that. But you just do get the feeling that what we're seeing now and what goes forward. I think what we should be aiming towards, Tim, is getting to a point where we actually have a functioning Australian patent committee.
Definitely, and there's BTAG at the moment, which is an advisory committee, and there's signed non-disclosure agreements, so getting information out of them isn't, well, near on impossible, is impossible. But we're told, I think we've both been told it wasn't what was recommended or the upgrades and downgrades that were made last week when he didn't follow exactly what BTAG suggested. So it is advisory. They're not obligated to follow that. I just, will be interesting to say there won't be any fewer Group 1s this season. Well, there's a Sydney Cup, Queensland Derby, those sort of races. Do they just get placed on a warning, or does the patent committee pull the trigger and say no? Sydney Cup's a Group 2, things like that. There's only one downgrade. I'm sure there'll be more come for the second half of the season.
Yeah, yeah, and it's one of these issues that rolls on the patent national tote. The ATC Racing New South Wales Dash, which had a new little chapter in the last week or so, with ATC officially going into administration. The Racing Reform Group have raised concerns about what that means. The hazard review is set to be released probably in the coming weeks. Maybe, we don't know. These are the sort of issues that continue to roll on within racing. Racing ministers is another one. I noticed earlier in the week that Western Australia's Don Punch is now the racing minister there, replacing Paul Papalia. And breaking news this morning, Tim, was that it looks like Tim Mander's going to be restored to his spot within racing minister within Queensland, and obviously Olympics minister as well, after a brief investigation was dropped. There'll be more details on that in the straight, but never a dull moment. And then you go globally, what's going on? We've got Chicago's Hawthorne Racecourse closed this week. Obviously, we've done a few stories about American courses closing in the last little bit, which is interesting enough in itself. I thought this was supposed to be the quiet time of year, Tim. It doesn't seem to be the fact. There's plenty to keep us writing about. It feels like certainly the foot hasn't got off the accelerator here at the straight in the last couple of weeks.
Keyboard's actually there's a couple of keys that just aren't working quite properly. That probably says how much of a bashing I've been giving it over winter. So, yeah, there's always something happening, isn't it? Every time we think there's a quiet day and we might battle to fill the straight or provide new content, multiple things happen at once, and I guess it is a sort of dynamic industry in many ways, and that's probably why we love covering it and being involved in it.
Yeah, my keyboard's literally on three legs. I've got a little thing holding up on one side. It rattles terribly every time I get stuck in it. And you know I do attack the keyboard with vigour, Tim. You've ever seen me in a full flight. I can destroy a keyboard. But that's what we do here at The Straight. We try our very best. The following segment is brought to you by Inglis. Entries are now open for the 2026 English Ready to Race sale, Australasia's leading breeze up sale, and the auction that produced Group 1 winning colts Tron Bolt and Libertad this season. The sale continues to set the benchmark, recording a gross of more than $20 million in 2025, with an 81% clearance rate and a $100,000 median. Buyers from across Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong, and beyond continue to target the sale for its proven results and outstanding graduates. The 2026 Ready to Race sale will be held at Inglis Riverside on October 15th, with entries closing August 7th. Visit inglis.com.au for more information. Tim, we eventually turned the page into the breeding world, and as I mentioned last week, it's a relatively a bit of a quieter spell in the breeding space, probably in the bloodstock space as well. A bit of overseas stuff to sort of cover off, but interesting story during the week, Tim. You covered off the guys that had been linked with the purchase of the Auss stud, which ended up sort of not proceeding because of other parties being involved and whatever else. There's a bit of a background to this story, sort of, and their investment within Australian racing, Australasian racing. Do you want to sort of talk us through that?
So Tony Ryder and Milan Park sort of swooped in, and it was a bit of a shock to even, some might remember, wrote a story sort of, I don't know whether it was early June or May, that a sale of the Oak Stud was pending, and that Hong Kong, with a consortium of Hong Kong, pretty much had it done, and it's just a matter of time, as it had been linked to sort of 16 months or so. And then Tony Ryder, who's Milan Park's the neighbouring property, said, "You know what? If I don't do it now, I'll never do it. I should have a crack." And he came in and made an offer, and Dick Carriman and Rick Williams, who manages the Oak Stud there at Cambridge in New Zealand, took the offer, sort of left the Hong Kong consortium, up the creek without a paddle sort of thing. And they could have chucked in the towel and, said they're hard done by, but no, they're pressing ahead. They had been buying mares, and they're continuing to buy mares to, for their burgeoning breeding portfolio in New Zealand. They want to breed Oaks and Derby winners and Cups horses. By the sounds of speaking to Alan, who's sort of overseas or is the conduit and manager for the consortium, and Paul Moroney and Catherine Brueggemann have been, I think they're up to about a dozen mares now. Bought one out of Tats last week in the UK to send down, and that mare will be covered by the stallion, from September 1 once as it gets here and cycling. So I think that's, as I wrote at the time that the Oak Stud sale was pending, that, you need new investment, and this is a positive thing that they're going to have a broodmare band of 12 in 1 year. If they keep going and get a bit of success, in the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, where they'll end up and, hopefully be a significant player in the New Zealand industry at a time when, their foal crop's falling like it is in most jurisdictions, be quite significant holding, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think beyond that, obviously, we saw this week the broader impact of Australia on the global market, Tim, with some very strong results in Japan. We've got used to seeing this at the JRHA Select sale. Katsumi Yoshida and Northern Farm have been coming down and picking off some of our quality mares for a good 15 years now, probably longer. And some of those quality mares have produced some great horses. Yankee Rose is obviously the one that produced the star Liberty Island, which was fantastic. We saw this week, and we saw I think the progeny, the foal sale. We saw, I think, Yankee Rose's foal and Fun Star's foal sell for, I think, 420 and about 320 million yen each, which is, significant money Australian. We're talking, three and a half. I think 410 million yen is about $3.8 million or 3.7 million Australian dollars. So that's big money. Sale topping horses, and the yearlings thing. We also saw Young Stars colt by Equinox sell for, I think, $420 million, which is the top price of the sale. Well, it's right, 220 million yen. It's a lot of money, Tim. And these Australian mares, we saw other mares get some good results as well. We saw Ruthless Dame, who's Australasian, a New Zealand bred horse, but won a Goodwood. She's had her first foal go through, and it did very well as well. The Japanese thirst for our best mares and our best bloodlines to combine with their excellent stallions is undiminished, and you can see it'll keep on going. That Northern Farm will keep turning up at Australian sales and buying these high quality mares.
Yeah, it just seems to, whatever it is, the Knicks with the Japanese stallion seems to work, sort of targeting those mile sort of, or 1,400 mile, 2,000 meter mares that are high class, just seem to nick over there. And given the numbers that are over there, they seem to probably outperform what they should, given, what they're up against. And this is always a good horse popping up every season out of an Australian mare.
Yeah, and then that's the key thing, is that success ongoing, isn't it? Tim, shipping over now to your Royal Monday column earlier this week, and obviously one of the news that sort of broke late last week was Danny Ralston, who was leaving the Hong Kong Jockey Club and becoming another recruit for Yulong as their the head of racing. Tim, is that
Yes,
that's
yes.
officially the role? That's quite interesting from that perspective. We spoke a lot about sort of Yulong's ambitions in Australia and what they're building. Obviously, they had James Harron come on board as a bloodstock consultant recently. Obviously, it's a new era for them, starting out in Hunter Valley this year with stallions there. But it also leaves a bit of a gap in Hong Kong, I suppose, to be filled. Tim, and you sort of looked at that earlier in the week.
Yeah, it was sort of a little bit of fun. I did sort of ring around a few different people and see who would you think would be going there, and using Danny as a test case, I guess, his background and what the Jockey Club were looking for, and he's coming off a highly successful Hong Kong international sale. So my thoughts were that probably with someone with that bloodstock experience and sales and dealing and running a sale, it is a sort of a unique skill set in many ways. And so, yeah, there's quite a few candidates that I thought, and there's a few I probably left off that I perhaps should have thrown in there. So I see the story seemed to go quite well. Justin Vermaak from South Africa, his name came up a bit. You know, I guess Kane Jones, newly engaged. I see he, comes through the same, had this replaced Danny at NZB. Could he go up there? Andrew Birch, his name has been thrown around, and James Price and Nicky Wong, well connected in Hong Kong as well. I'm sure there's plenty of other candidates. It'd be a highly sought after job. There was a trainer messaged me earlier in the week saying, "Geez, I wouldn't mind Danny's job." I said, "Which one?" And he said, "Either." So it's just, it is a lot of pressure, but also highly sought after, and it'd be interesting to see who management end up picking and selecting to guide that international sale and owners advisory going forward.
Just sort of exiting out of the breeding and bloodstock space, Tim, as we head out, there's a bit of commentary around Aquis, and obviously we're seeing that one of their key farms up there in Canungra is being sold, which was, I think, the pre-trading farm and the farm that was up there. There's probably thoughts that certainly that farm won't exist. The broader Aquis farm will be sold off for housing development in the next 5 or 10 years, given what's going on there. I guess, what do you feel like Tony Fung's involvement will be in Australian racing moving forward, Tim?
Oh, I think it off the heights of when they first came in, it's definitely less than it was, but still significant. And I guess, like, even dare I say, the Oak Stud and Tony Ryder before, it is a land banking play, all these buying a lot of these farms, particularly there for Aquis. There was plans for try and get casino licenses, and there's lots of different angles to that, but land banking was one of them, and they're just selling off the pre-training hinterland thoroughbreds there. A sort of it's quite a Newington Farms nearby. It is sort of a equine area with all the capital upgrades that are required to run a business like that. I'd be interested in how much interest there is, and significant investment required to buy it. But yeah, as you say, I think that's probably the start, and there'll be more others. And there's obviously the Sunlight development, the Gold Coast Turf Club, a joint venture between Tony or Aquas and the club. So yeah, there's just be more of that, and I guess was always the longer term aim. I guess we've got to see it as that.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a broader challenge around racing around Australia as, Australia becomes urbanised and those opportunities sort of pop up. And yeah, that's the question. And maybe, like we talk a bit about Racing New South Wales' land strategy, maybe longer term that will play in their favour, having those, that land available. So interesting times. The following segment is brought to you by Darley. You only have to look at the names: Dubai Millennium, Dubawi, Too Darn Hot, Broadsiding, Night of Thunder, Ombudsman, and Gayaf. It's a line that keeps moving the breed forward. And now there's Observer, a Group 1 Australian Guineas winner and a Group 1 Victoria Derby winner, the next generation of the Dubawi dynasty, standing this season at Darley. Tim, we've talked a lot about wagering already, and so we won't get too much more into the national tote aspect around it. I suppose Tabcorp, just want to mention, Tabcorp had a reasonably decent win this week with 100 venues, part of a large group of sort of hotel ownership agreeing to sign on as to the new TAB venue agreements, which obviously caused a little bit of a kerfuffle in the last few weeks with a few of the people opting out. I think about 200 venues have opted not to sign out of the 3,500. So that 100 venues across many different states and involves some other integration with TAB, but it's important. I think it's ALH haven't signed on officially yet. There's 300 venues in that. They're continuing to operate, but that deal's expected imminently. Yeah, so I guess what we're seeing, if you combine that and the national tote and everything else, and the way that TAB view retail and putting more investment into retail to a certain extent, and the way things are done, we're really seeing sort of 2 years after he stepped into the role, the impact of Gil McLachlan in terms of his strategy. It's really starting to take shape ahead of the new racing season, Tim.
Yeah, definitely. And there's probably detractors to the retail side of it. Obviously, sort of probably hit a little bit of a roadblock there with Austrac sort of coming in and investigating, but that's the process they're going down. And obviously it is significant cost for pubs to have a tab, running a tab, and they've changed the model there. But getting those big guys on is significant for Tabcorp and shareholders and punters, I guess, that frequent those venues. And I said under the national tote, as we said earlier, those generosities and how they maximise that, and whether there's in-venue incentives and things like that, it'd be it'd be interesting another 6-12 months where it's at to look back.
Yeah, it's a fascinating time, and I guess it's where the rubber hits the road for Gil McLachlan and his team. And yeah, I think the next 12 months will be crucial to that as well. Another article I'll point people towards is the online battle for wagering customers through website traffic analysis, an article written by Warwick Barr early this week. Really interesting to see where the dominant sort of, numbers sit within Australia. Obviously, Sportsbet dominate that space because, they're the biggest player at the moment in that space. But where Tab sit, where Entain and the other ones sit, and which ones derive or develop most engagement. Well worth a read of that article, just to give it a bit more insight into, I guess, the digital footprint of these wagering companies, Tim, which is always interesting to look at. Finally, I guess looking at sort of across the board with wagering, we spoke about Tabcorp. It's fair to say, Tim, there's probably a bit of structural change coming across the board in wagering. Every year seems to be a year of change in the wagering space, but there's plenty going on at the moment. Yeah, we've seen changes in a few different of those major businesses. Entain over the last sort of 18 months, Sportsbet's gone through its own sort of changes with the smaller operators as well. We've got Betr setting up in Tasmania, which is, I think, set a bit of a cat amongst the pigeons with the other new Northern Territory registered bookmakers sort of looking into options around that. So it seems like a time there's plenty of things moving.
Definitely, that's why we said there's always something to write about, isn't there? There's something always changing and quite, looking for increased margins. That's their job. If you see the CEOs and things like that to look after shareholders or gain market share, and I'm sure innovation will continue.
Before we head off, Tim, just a little bit of housekeeping here and a little push here for the Straight Jobs, our fantastic job site, which is gathering great momentum at the moment under our esteemed commercial operation manager, Matty Timms. If you're looking for your next opportunity in racing, breeding or wagering, or searching for the right person to join your team, the Straight Jobs is the industry's dedicated careers platform, connecting employers with talented professionals right across the thoroughbred sector. For the latest opportunities, industry careers, go to jobs.thestraight.com.au. And off the back of that too, I like to remind our members, our paid members, if you're keen on membership, have a look at it. We sent out a survey earlier this week to our members to have a look at give you their insights and thoughts on how we're travelling, what we're doing well, including how straight talk's going. Some weeks are probably better than others, Tim's, as we find out. But always interested to see what people have to say. And if you've got any feedback to send directly to us about this program or anything else, send us an email at editor@thestraight.com.au. We're always happy to have your feedback. Tim, anything else you want to touch on before we head off for the week?
Yeah, just a story I'll have to follow up. Magic Millions have just released their, calling for entries for their 2-year-old sale, 2 and 3-year-old sale, I should say, which will be 12th of October. Won't mean much, but that's 3 days before the English Ready to Race sale. So same week, just very interesting timing. I know there's been talk they'd want to do that to try and, I guess, get the international buyers not having to go back and forth in the space of a week or 2 weeks, go back to whether it's Malaysia or Hong Kong or wherever, Korea, Philippines. They're trying to obviously clearly get that same buying market on the early in the week. So that'll be very interesting to see how that's received.
Yeah, interesting times. I think those sales and where they sit will probably again evolve in the next sort of couple of years, Tim, and we'll see what happens with that. Thanks for joining us on Straight Talk, brought to you by our fabulous sponsors, Darley and Inglis. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. We record on Thursdays. We usually publish on Thursdays. We'll continue to do so for the foreseeable future. If you have any feedback, as I mentioned before, send us an email or reach out to us on social media. Always happy to talk to you. And we'll talk to you again next week.